I was essentially born holding an NES controller, and from the age of 4 onwards, I was playing the original 3 Mario Bros games religiously. I got more comfort and nourishment from Mario games than I did from my own mother's teat. Just like most kids in the 90s, I went from Mario game to Mario game until one day I sort of just lost interest. It was probably around the age of 14 when I discovered the love for the female touch. Occasionally I would boot up Mario 64 or play a random Mario Kart or Mario Party, but the days of playing brand new Mario games as they released was over. Now, I had every intention of playing and reviewing the console version of Empire of the Ants, but for whatever reason, it was delayed 2 weeks. So in a frantic, I searched around and looked for a new release that I would not only enjoy playing, but also reviewing. Then I noticed Mario and Luigi Brothership, a game I had heard nothing about, wasn't hyped for, or wasn't even sure I would enjoy. I made the stupid error of watching an IGN review that gave the game a mediocre 5 out of 10. Surely this game couldn't be that bad. A 5 out of 10? Maybe I shouldn't buy it. Wait a second, IGN are f***ing morons, let's give it a hot crack! As I was watching that terrible review, I started to get glimpses of Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, a game that I haven't played since the early 2000s. The memory was there. I know I enjoyed Superstar Saga as a kid, and I remember playing it all the time. I have such fond memories of this game that I bought it for my physical collection like 6 months ago. In between all the childhood trauma and random boners was a Mario and Luigi RPG game that I loved. So surely Brothership couldn't be a 5 out of 10. It had been 9 years since a Mario RPG of this style had been released. So I guess you could say that there was somewhat of a demand for one. I'll give it to Nintendo, it does take some big Nintendo-sized balls to release an RPG that both bitter old gamers like myself enjoy, but also a game that panders to the younger, upcoming generations. I was a 4-year-old playing an old school Mario game, so you have to keep in mind how difficult it might be to make a game that a 33-year-old can play, as well as a 4-year-old that was born in the year 2020. My god, I'm getting old, help me, please stop the aging process. With that in mind, I went into Brothership knowing that the story wouldn't be some epic dark fantasy where Princess Peach was kidnapped and being held hostage and tortured. I knew Luigi wouldn't be some half-drunk disappointment of a brother that had been cancelled for being a Trump supporter. The story was exactly what I expected, and I went into the game with that mindset, and because of this, I wasn't disappointed at all. The story starts with Mario and Luigi being sucked into a random portal and brought to the world of Concordia. Concordia used to be a place of community and peace. Its land held together by the energy of the the Uni Tree. Then one day the Uni Tree suddenly dies and withers away, causing the world of Concordia to split into islands, forcing the people on each island into solitude. Somehow, even though this is a different realm, they all speak fluent Italian and can understand Mario and Luigi perfectly. Mario and Luigi want to return home, but not before helping the residents of Concordia reconnect. With the help of Connie, who is growing a new Uni Tree, they work together to plug in new islands, connecting them once again. Now, you will notice by the gameplay footage that the people of Concordia are some weird power outlets. It's a strange choice, and yes, early on I struggled to actually care for these wall sockets. Even our little sidekick Snoutlet has a power plug looking face. Something that Disney does with the Star Wars movies is they introduce interesting characters like Baby Yoda and BB-8. characters that explode in popularity and become a whole toy range and whatnot. Mario and Luigi Brothership introduces some interesting personalities, but there is not a single person I would ever expect to see again in future games. We are lucky that familiar faces regularly show up throughout the story, and if it wasn't for that, I would have really struggled to hold interest for the campaign's 35-hour runtime, creating new friends along the journey that join us in the fight against the main baddie Zocket, who again, design choice wise, is a little dull, especially if you compare him to the likes of Bowser or the complicated design of a Thwomp. Now, I have to remind you again that this game isn't only just for adults like ourselves, but it is for little bastards as well, upcoming generations. So you have to expect a story that is a little simple and a little silly. There were a few moments in the story where I'd do one of those weird little laughs, you know, the and there were some stages where the dialogue was so boring or repetitive that I had to force myself to not skip whole sections of story. It really is a roller coaster of enjoyment. Parts of the game feel high stakes and intense, and others feel like a chore to progress through. But overall, it balances out quite nicely and is a decent chronicle in the lives of Mario and Luigi. When you think of Mario, you don't expect high-end graphics like God of War or Death Stranding, which is probably good considering the lack of power the Switch has compared to more modern consoles. I played half in handheld mode and half on my TV display on the OG Switch, and it ran fairly well. I truly love the way the story progresses. The main hub of Ship Shape Island, where the new uni tree is growing, is essentially a boat that traverses the sea looking for new islands to connect to. The more islands you connect, the stronger your tree becomes, which unlocks new currents that you can explore. Each island is brimming with its own personality. An island of artists who are getting bored of creating in the same areas. An island that is half frozen and half lava, where the citizens argue over which dish is better, an ice cream or a hot spicy stew. An island where its central location is one giant maze that needs to be solved to progress. An island that Chris from Mr. Beast won and is using to hide from the local police. I at no point thought that the islands were boring or repetitive, and while you do need to revisit some of them, whether it be for the main story or side missions, it was always a joy going back to explore the newly opened areas that you couldn't access before because of the lack of abilities. Early on, as you explore, you can only really do the basics, jumping and platforming for example. You will pretty much immediately notice areas that are off limits. Some of these you will naturally revisit during the gameplay, but at times you need to remember these locations if you want to get the treasure or item waiting at the top. As the uni tree grows, so does your arsenal of abilities, which for those of you who are familiar with the RPG games will know that they are usually Mario and Luigi 69ing each other into some weird shape like a UFO to spin to far to reach places, or a ball to fit into narrow pipes. I don't even want to imagine where Mario's head is right now. There is nothing overly complicated about each level, they're all fairly simple to progress through. Your new sidekick Snoutlet will pretty much explain everything you need to do. It is very hand-holding, but I honestly didn't mind too much. I do wish that perhaps there were more optional islands that ramped up the difficulty of the platforming and puzzle solving, but overall I was pleased with the exploration and progression of each level I visited. During the game you will come across little versions of Mario Party minigames. These are much more simple versions, but they were always really fun to come across. Once again, they were probably a bit too easy. Having optional, much harder ones would have gone a long way for the older players. Something that might frustrate some fans is you can't swap between Mario and Luigi. Mario definitely takes more of a front seat, but without spoiling anything, Luigi is potentially far more important to the story. There were a few instances where Luigi sort of lagged behind and got stuck on something. The footage you just saw is actually just me forcing it to happen. It happened so little that I didn't actually capture any gameplay footage naturally. After the first hour, I didn't really notice that you couldn't switch between the two because you don't really need to, and it would have felt very forced if they had made that an option. The combat really is where the game shines the most though. If you haven't played a Mario RPG before, think of Pokemon for example. You come across enemies that can be quite difficult to ignore. You then take it in turns attacking each other. But instead of simply selecting a move to use, you need to perform the quick time events to successfully pull them off. Mario and Luigi start off with a simple jump attack that is simple enough to perform, but can be messed up easily if not paying attention. You will then unlock a hammer attack which can be used on spiked enemies to avoid hurting your feet. As you progress further, you unlock bro attacks that use BP points in order to be used. They are more powerful moves that have a higher degree of difficulty to perform. Even after 40 hours of gameplay, I still have trouble performing some of the more advanced bros attacks, but you can practice them in the training mode. The best and hardest part about each fight is that you also need to dodge, block, or counter the enemies that are attacking you, which can be easier said than done. Each enemy has a few different movesets that can at times be hard to learn. You will also meet so many different types of baddies that when you face one you haven't seen for a while, you will need to relearn their movesets. Also, just like in Pokemon, if you don't fight often enough, you can find yourself under-leveled for certain areas. Now, I'm a bit OCD with these types of games. I don't have OCD in real life or anything. But in games where you have to level, I pretty much fight absolutely everything in sight, which can lead to quite a lot of repetition. Fighting every enemy in sight is great for leveling up, but when you fight the same monsters over and over again, it can definitely start to feel like a chore. Especially early on when your moveset isn't as diverse. It also leads to the difficulty of the game being fairly cruisy. I didn't lose a single battle in my whole playthrough, and while some fights tested me and really forced me to focus or use lots of health mushrooms, I never felt like I was in risk to lose the battle. I take that back, there's some really tough enemies at the end of the game that caused me to die. I'm not gonna lie. I failed. I failed. I'm that little bastard kid from before. Another great feature of Brothership is the inclusion of power ports that you plug special abilities into. I don't want to spoil some of the later game plugs, so I'll just go over some of the more simple ones. Some add status effects to enemies, others turn attacks into area attacks, or add an extra bit of damage at the end via a spike ball. Some will increase your chance for loot, or make dodging easier when getting attacked. Each plug can be used a certain amount of times before needing a long cooldown. So at times you will need to save your favourites or more powerful ones for harder fights. They can also be combined together. An area attack plug combined with a status effect plug can be used to potentially apply that status effect to every enemy. It's a great addition to the game, and it keeps things fresh, especially when some of your existing moves start to get a little bit monotonous. Now, this is an RPG game, and with that you would expect RPG elements. Mario and Luigi do level throughout the game. Each level your stats increase, and every 9 levels you get to select a special attribute like more power or defense, for example. Alongside leveling is equipment you gather on your journey that also adds to your stats, with some of them having extra bonuses. With Mario, I focused heavily on speed, trying to give him gloves or clothes that increased this stat. This at the time led to Mario having 2 attacks before an enemy even had 1. Luigi had more health and defense for most of the game, so I gave him a bangle that increased the odds of enemies attacking him instead of Mario. My one issue is that I wish there were more. I want to be confused or overwhelmed by which boots I should equip each character with. But once you sort of find a better pair of shoes, you never will go back to the previous pair you were wearing. It was fine, I didn't mind it, but I do wish there were more options once again for the older, more experienced players. Overall, Mario and Luigi Brothership isn't going to be the best one in the franchise, but you will find a solid experience that isn't too long or too short. The story is decent, at times really epic, with pinches of boredness sprinkled throughout. The exploration, while simple and easy, is never repetitive or dull. The combat is awesome and outshines most normal Mario games. However, because the abilities you learn are finite, there is essentially little to no replayability, which for me is fine. 12-year-old me would have loved the game and probably played through it a few times in the 1 year. But as an adult, I can appreciate my one playthrough, put it down, and never play it again. This game might be a little simple and far too easy, but a 5 out of 10, it is definitely not mediocre. I give this game a good score of 7 out of 10. If you're a fan of Mario games, and especially the RPG games, you definitely want to check it out. Thank you very much for watching my review. Leave it in the comments. What's your favourite Mario and Luigi RPG game? Mine's definitely Superstar Saga. I just have crazy memories, and I'm actually going to go play that again. If you want to stick around on the channel, make sure you subscribe, because we're actually going to be doing a review on the Lord of the Rings, the Third Age game next. It's an older game, but it's one of the more sort of not played ones after like that original cool trilogy on the PlayStation 2. Alright, that's it for me. Until next time, see ya.